how many men are being taught to figure out work-life balance? If you were to go into Google, right? It's all the mom blogs, all the mom speakers are, oh, if you could just figure out work-life balance, why aren't we teaching the men? Because as with other things, people expect that it's our responsibility to figure that out. And so for me, I think it's a scam. What is a scam? I'm going to shake this really bright and shiny thing for you, and you're going to do everything possible, because if you just get this bright, shiny thing, then all of your problems will go away. They're not. And it doesn't exist. And so what I teach women instead is to figure out what is a perfect work-life integration for you. What do you want out of your career, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an employee? What do you want out of that? What's the impact that you're wanting to have? And what do you want out of your life? Whether you're a mom, you're a partner, or you're just a daughter or someone's friend, what do you want that to be? Because you have to bring the whole of you to the world. You can't just focus on work alone or this other part of your life. Everything needs to have its space. And that's where I teach women to really figure out how we can incorporate all of those pieces based on your season of life and the desired life that you want.
Welcome to the Feminist Wellbeing Podcast, my sisters. I'm your host, Stephanie Dodier, non-diet nutritionist, certified intuitive eating counselor, and cognitive behavior coach. And after earning my PhD in diet culture at 40, I graduated and I said, no more. And that's what this podcast is about here. It's about helping you feel damn good by reshaping your mind instead of your body. And we do that by fighting diet culture and patriarchy, by living powerfully. And today's episode is just a kick in the butt that most of us need, that prevents us, when we don't give it to ourselves, to live powerfully. And that is seeking work-life balance. And our guest today, Unyime Oguta, is going to teach us why it's actually a scam. Work-life balance is a scam, and how she sees it and coach her client with work-life balance. We're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about making peace with being selfish. How about that? And she has a twist on self-care that you're absolutely going to love. And here's her tagline. I'm following her on social media because Unyime has been on the show now. I think it's her 4th time. She's a certified non-diet coach who helps ambitious women actually not burn out and live powerfully. And she had this tagline on her Instagram a few months ago that got me to reach out to her. She said, my baseline is high maintenance. I'm like, oh, so juicy. You have to come on the podcast and we have to talk about that work-life balance and how it's a scam and how it's actually creating more burnout for women. So are you ready to have a completely new perspective on work-life balance for women? My team's going to roll in the interview. Welcome to the show, Unyime.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
How many times has it been?
I don't know. I was thinking about that before I came on the podcast, and I thought, you know what? I've stopped counting.
Yeah, we did a couple co-hosting when you were working for me as a coach. Then we did another one on its own. And now we're going to talk about something completely different. But every time those conversations rock my world.
I'm so glad. Me too. I always love our conversations.
So let's do this. Let's rock the world of the people listening. And the title of the episode is Work-Life Balance is a Freaking Scam.
Absolutely.
Tell me your thoughts about that. And maybe position yourself with people like, I've never heard of Unyime before.
Absolutely. So, hello, listeners. I am a life coach and I work with working moms. Actually, I work with all women, but working moms are my gems because I was one of those moms. 10 years ago, I experienced burnout. And back then, I thought, and my doctor had confirmed this, that I was misdiagnosed with IBS, but we thought it was due to chronic stress that was not managed. And if you've been in the world in the past few years, you know that that is a typical symptom of burnout. And that experience to me was what kickstarted my interest in self-development, which then became the work that I do now, coaching women. When that happened, I was the mom who wanted to have it all. But to have it all to me meant as a high achiever that I did all the things. I still showed up and I was the perfect wife and I was the perfect mom for my daughter. I was pregnant with my second child at that time. And I noticed the women who had gone ahead of me, who had older kids, they were working, they were always tired and overwhelmed. And people kept saying, this is just the way motherhood has to be. There's so many sacrifices. You can't have it all. I was not one to listen to that. And I thought, as soon as I figure this burnout thing out, I'm going to try and figure out how I can have it all without stressing myself and overwhelming myself. And that has been my journey. It continues to be an evolving journey, which is probably why I keep coming back to this show, because Stephanie always brings it out.
Every time there's a new version of you, you're like, let's go to the show and talk about this new version of you.
Yes. And I think that's the beauty of life coaching, because I believe that every one of us is on a journey on this earth. And what happens is we're bombarded with who we should be and what we should do and what we should have. And so we settle for what other people hand over to us. We never really go out on our own to try and figure out, what am I here to do? What am I here to leave behind? What's the legacy that I'm here to create? And for me, I think that's where my heart for moms really comes in, because mothers are amazing. If you can raise a child, whether it's yours or even just by extension of someone that you kind of mentor as a woman, that's really powerful, because you have the power to impact generations. Some of the work that you'll do, you probably are not going to see it. You're probably going to be way gone, and then the fruits will start to show up. And I think women, because of all of the systems and things that we've learned in the world, we've kind of shrunk ourselves to just be okay with the pie that we're given. And so my whole premise for this work is women have the permission to do whatever they want, however they want it, whenever they want it. We need to stop waiting for permission. We have the permission we've been waiting for. And so we have to start acting like it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so now I do coach women and I offer speaking engagements as well. But the work-life balance work from that came to me because I work with high achieving women who work and they have children. And many of them kept saying, I want work-life balance. If I could just figure out this work-life balance thing. And if you were to look at it, how many men are being taught to figure out work-life balance? If you were to go into Google, right? It's all the mom blogs, all the mom speakers are, if you could just figure out work-life balance. Why aren't we teaching the men? Because as with other things, people expect that it's our responsibility to figure that out. And so for me, I think it's a scam. What is a scam? I'm going to shake this really bright and shiny thing for you, and you're going to do everything possible, because if you just get this bright, shiny thing, then all of your problems will go away. They're not. And it doesn't exist. And so what I teach women instead is to figure out what is a perfect work-life integration for you. What do you want out of your career, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an employee? What do you want out of that? What's the impact that you're wanting to have? And what do you want out of your life? Whether you're a mom, you're a partner, or you're just a daughter or someone's friend. What do you want that to be? Because you have to bring the whole of you to the world. You can't just focus on work alone or this other part of your life. Everything needs to have its space. And that's where I teach women to really figure out how we can incorporate all of those pieces based on your season of life and the desired life that you want. It's something that I'm still working on, but I'm very excited about it.
What do you mean by season of life? For someone listening to this, this podcast is specifically designed for women and mom, right, who are told to balance everything. And you're talking about season of life. Tell me more about that.
So seasons of life comes from nature. If we were to look around us, you think about, I live in the north, and so we have 4 seasons. So we've got winter, we've got spring, we've got fall and summer. All of those seasons have a reason. in our pursuit for work-life balance, what we assume that we're supposed to do is to be on all the time. And that's why a mom will come home, her kids are now grown and she has space. What does she do? She goes and finds a second job, or she finds something else to keep herself busy, because we've been kind of trained that if we're not always on the go, then we're not productive and we're not worthy. We've learned to take our worth from our achievements. And so when you really think about the idea of seasons, why do they exist? They exist because there's a time for everything. In the summertime where I live, we've got plants, it's raining, we've got butterflies, birds, all the things are alive, they're bright. And then the fall season comes to prepare us for winter. What happens is the leaves start to turn brown, things start to, cool down a little bit. The birds start to build their nest because they know they're going to go away for the winter. And I actually live where I live. I've got a tree where typically we'll see the foxes. They've been here for years and they'll start building their nest. We see squirrels start to pick up, the acorns and they're going to go hide, or the nuts and they're going to go hide. These are the things that exist in nature. Why don't we adopt this life? And so when I speak about seasons, you need to really think about, if you're a mom who just had a baby, what is your season calling you to be? Perhaps this is the time that your body needs a little bit of rest. Your body needs to be reset. And so that's left for you to recognize, this is not the time for me to be trying to put like 10 things on my plate, because I just went through 9 months of my body not feeling like mine. Even for some of us, 2 years later, we're still struggling with the impacts of the pregnancy, right? Depending on how your experience was. I know for my second daughter, I just felt like my body was never mine for a long time. And that led me down the path of struggling with my body image. But we need to really recognize that these are things that are happening. And the more we pay attention to, what do I need in this season? What does my body require? What are the things that I require to support me so that I show up as the best version of myself? The more we can push back on the expectations, the more we can have boundaries, the more we can speak up and say, no, that's not going to work for me. Or, hey, that's a great idea. What if we come back in 3 months and check it? It doesn't mean that opportunities are going to escape and you're never going to find them. It's more about being strategic in the way you think about your life and plan so that you're supported, and then you keep burnout at bay.
So when we're thinking about work-life balance being a scam, that would mean you're interacting with yourself in your identity as a woman the same, no matter which age or which evolution of your family you're in. You're just like on the go all the time. The whole Adam of like bouncing back from your baby, like you're on the go. As soon as that baby's ejected out of you, you're like, let's go back to it. There's no different relationship with yourself based on what's happening in your identity as a woman and as a mom. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so when people are chasing that work-life balance, it's like, oh, well, I can't let any of these things suffer. I need to be on all the time, versus recognizing, you know what, I just had a baby. And so if you have your however many weeks off or months, depending on where you live in the world, really being present and focusing on that instead of, oh, I need to make sure that I have my resume updated, or I need to keep in touch with my work people so they don't forget me. When that's happening, you're not resting. And then you go to work and you're now missing your baby because you spent all of that time thinking about work. And so we never really rest. And I was thinking about this because if we look at it statistically, a lot of women, as they get older, they tend to start to develop, diseases and issues with their bodies. And we don't recognize that it's all of the stress that we've been carrying, all of these issues. We're working on our nervous system. We never really get the time to self-regulate and calm down. And so we're always constantly going. And even then when we decide, well, I'm going to change because maybe the doctor is like, oh, you have to stop working. We can't. We then go into shock because it's like, I don't know how to do it. And so my whole premise is like, when I'm working with clients, what season are you in? And we start to recognize, what does it look like? How would you be cared for in this place? And prioritizing yourself first, because you're the common denominator in all of those areas, in your relationships, at work, those things will not exist without you in them. And so you have to really know that you're important. And just because you take the time to decide this is who I am, it doesn't take away from any of those things. And your worth is not going to change.
And that's one thing you're saying I want you to talk about is making peace with being self-ish. Because when we hear work-life balance is a scam, we have to ask ourselves, like, is it even normal for a woman to be working full-time and have kids, right? Like, just that is the bare minimum question. To me, in my opinion, it's not. Like, when we have young children, we technically are meant to be with them all the time. Now we're layering 40 hours more in a week. It's not normal. So is that where making peace with selfish is in the context of today's society?
Absolutely. And I think there's also room for a bigger conversation. But when it comes to just thinking about the word selfish.
Yeah. Self-ish. I want to tell people, like, the way she writes it, it's self, comma, ish.
Right? You have to come back to self. And this is not about going into yourself and being almost like making yourself an idol, but it's recognizing that you're human. You are a spirit that's in this body. And so what are you here to do? You're not just here to run the race of humanity and then you're done. If that's what we're here to do, then what's the point? There's no point. We really have to think about it when we talk about self-ish. Who am I? Knowing who I am as a person. What are my values? What do I love? What are the things that bring me joy? Starting with that and being grounded in that, so that everything that you do, the opportunities that come your way, the relationships that you engage in, the jobs that you take, everything is filtered through that lens. Why so many of us struggle is that because we're so used to, oh, this is the way it needs to be. And you and I have talked about this, the good mom syndrome, where it's like,
that's exactly what it is.
Right? It's like,
I think that's one of the episodes we did.
Yes.
The good mom syndrome. We'll link to it in the show notes.
Right? Like we think about things like that, where it's like, oh, to be a good mom, this is the way you need to be. And so we chase after that because we think that's the thing that's going to finally make me. But then you realize exactly it doesn't work. And now you're stressed and overwhelmed. And then you start to bring shame. That's where we start to shame ourselves. Oh, if other people are doing it, why am I not able to do it? And then we shame ourselves. And there is no way you can change from a place of shame. Brene Brown talks about this. When we bring shame, we bring judgment, we bring secrecy, we think we're the only ones in it. And we close ourselves up to any form of change. And if we decide to change, it's so I can fix myself, so I can finally be accepted, so I can finally feel worthy, when none of that is necessary. And so making peace with being selfish is realizing that your peace depends on that. Your peace depends on you knowing who you are and being solid in that and being grounded in it. I always talk to my clients about prioritizing your peace over performance, which is huge for women. Always asking yourself, how is this showing up in my peace? How is this impacting my peace? How is this from a place of love for me? When we ask that question, we can never go wrong. And then the work becomes managing your emotions when other people respond in the way you don't like. Because if people are like, okay, that's fine, you can be selfish, we're okay. But what happens when your child is like, you're a bad mom? I heard this so many times with my kids when they were much younger. And I said, you know what? I'm not that mom who wants to be a good mom. I'm not interested in being a good mom at all. Ever. And my kids were surprised, but it had to be a learning for them to know, I love you. However, my peace is also important. As much as you want to throw a tantrum right now because I don't want to go to the store and buy you this thing, you'll be okay. Right? And so it's really being able to handle our emotions when people don't agree with who we're showing up to be, and being okay with them having their thoughts and their emotions. You and I know this. They are in control of that. We're not in control of it.
Because it's almost expected that as a woman, layer in mother identity. So when you're a woman having children, that taking care of yourself, being selfish, will cause reaction.
Yeah.
because it's against the expectation of society where you should do it all, have it all, and be totally balanced. And when you're saying, no, it's not possible, actually, I have to take care of me, people are going to have their thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had people ask me how I can travel and live my 3 kids with my husband, and I'm gone for 5 days. And I'm like, I don't like, what is the problem? And it used to bother me initially when I just had 2 kids. But I realized that this is the thing that we've learned as women. It's just like a part of the culture. First, people make assumptions about you. When you're in a work environment or place where you're interacting with people and men involved as well, people make assumptions about what you're capable of doing, especially if you're a mom. I've been in meetings where people are surprised that I'm a mom. And then they're even more surprised when they hear I've got 3 kids. And they're even more surprised when they hear that I've got this coaching business and I coach women, because I don't look like the idea of mom. Their expectation is she's always late. She doesn't look put together when she shows up. She's always complaining about her children or her marriage. They have all of these thoughts. And for me, I'm like, no, I don't subscribe to any of those stereotypes. I just show up as myself. If you want to talk about my children, sure, we can chat about it, but that's not the priority right now. We're talking about me, and I'm the focus. And yes, it does sound selfish, but you know what? It's one of the greatest gifts that I've given my kids, because I see them creating and becoming their own individuals outside of me. They know what they can expect from me, and they know what they cannot expect from me. I'm not here to entertain them. I'm here to create a home where they feel safe, they feel emotionally balanced, and they can express themselves however way they want, because they know it's not going to take away from my worth. I'm never sad when they're, upset. I just let them be who they are. And I've seen how that has changed the way that I relate to my kids.
Would you say, so in the world of anti-diet and non-diet, we're saying women have the power of breaking the intergenerational trauma of dieting? Would you say that your way of coaching women will break the intergenerational trauma of good mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was saying that I'm working on something, I'm still stewing and contemplating, and I'm sure you're going to find out because we always have these conversations. But I'm starting to track with my clients the impact of the coaching work that we're doing. And time again, I'm realizing, there's always that connection piece to the mom, because there's so many things that we'll work on when it comes to their career. They're doing very amazing. They're achieving high standards. And then we touch on the family. That's where the poke is, right? It's like, well, I can't make this money because then my husband's going to be jealous, or I can't do this because my kids are going to be this. And then we start to unpack and we realize, this is a pattern within the females in the family. And I've been really thinking, I'm not much of a history person, but lately I've been forced, because I love this work so much and I'm committed to really honing my craft. I've been reading history and thinking about, why is it the womanhood that's being attacked? Goes back to what I said before. We have so much power. A woman can change generations. And if the world has been created in a way where patriarchy is the norm, there are all these, beauty standards, there's dieting, all to subject women,
yes,
to submit to the culture. It's no wonder motherhood gets to be the place where so many of us struggle, because, no one ever gave us the rule book, right? No one ever taught us that. And so now we're having to figure that. So then my work becomes, that's a pattern that we need to break. And it's a really hard and tough thing. One of my clients recently said, you really hold women in a place of vulnerability. And I know what that feels like. I'll just share a quick story. My mom never came to my wedding. And a lot of people don't know that. When that happened, I told people it's because she couldn't make it. But the real reason is because I had drawn a line in the sand with her. I wanted to get married in Canada. She wanted to get married in Nigeria. Knowing how much I was making at that time, I was supporting my mom with 5 siblings. I couldn't afford to have a wedding in Nigeria because I'm the first daughter. There's so many expectations. And I know my mom struggled a little bit with people pleasing. So she would have wanted to do all the things to show like, this is my daughter that went abroad. And I understand that. But I told her, you know what? I get it. However, this is where we're going to get to save money. You come here, we have fun. And she chose not to come to my wedding. I had to deal with the shame of that. I had to work through the pain of that because I knew that I drew a line. And you know what? For 2 years, I was estranged from my siblings. I was estranged from my mom. And then I went back home in 2016 and we were having a conversation about this. And she said, you know, I'm so proud of you for being brave to do what I was not able to do. I can see how things have changed. And I will tell you that has transformed the way that my siblings and I, you know, kind of relate with people. There are 4 girls in my family and 2 men. But the way that we've kind of evolved, it has changed so deeply the way that we approach relationships. But it's because I dared to draw a line in the sand. And it was a really painful experience. Even sometimes when I think about it, I still feel the tenderness in my heart. My mom is no longer here with us. But it's a moment I look back on and I'm so proud of myself because that has helped me hold space for so many women who are like, you know what? This is a hard thing. And I'm like, no, it's not. It feels that way because no one is showing us the blueprint. But if we start, then other women can see the change in us and they can also change their own patterns. What would that look like? You always say, what would happen if all women just woke up and they decided they're okay with their bodies, right? What if all moms just woke up tomorrow and they're like, oh, I'm fine with the way I'm raising my kids? A lot of the self-help books on parenting would not exist. A lot of the studies and teachings and whatever on work-life balance would not exist because we'd just be like, you know what? I'm okay. And so my work is let's deal with that pattern, but also recognize you have all of the wisdom you need to raise your children if you can just learn to be a student of this kid that you were given and recognizing that your worth does not depend on who they become. They have their own path. You have your own path. And it just so happens that you're the one who gets to facilitate that in this human experience.
That's so juicy. So a couple thoughts for you. Basically, what you're saying is you're working yourself out of a job because we're healing this generation of mother, the one listening, you and people in my age group, so that the next generation doesn't need healing.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's it, then I think that beautiful? My work is done. Yeah.
Because it's the same thing I say with dieting. Like if we all heal ourselves, our daughters will not have to overcome the thin ideal and do body image work and do intuitive eating. They'll just be intuitive eater, normal eater.
Mm-hmm.
Your daughters will know how to do motherhood in a powerful way. Because it happens to be you have 3 daughters.
Yes. What are the odds?
Well, it's not an odd. I think the universe or God is like, oh, we're going to give her 3 girls so she can break the cycle and like literally replicate this everywhere. Like the work you're doing will show through 3 daughters and their own family and their own kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so amazing to think about. And I even think about it if we were to expand it out. So the women who don't have children and men get to see the change in these moms and they get to hold space for that change to happen too, right? We always talk about allies coming together. You don't have to have children to be an ally to a mom, but you can learn, you can hold space for them. So when they're telling you, I'm so angry at my child, you're not judging them. You're like, yes, that makes so much sense. How can I support you? Instead of, telling her she's a bad mom or she just needs to pray a little more or she needs more self-care. No, she doesn't need any of that. She is angry. And we really want to know it's okay for you to feel angry because anger is a normal human emotion. And now what is at the base of the anger? Maybe you just need to sleep. Maybe you need to poop and pee. Who knows? The last time you went to the bathroom, right? But we can't get there and help women recognize how much they need to care for themselves if we're not all supporting and creating environments where they're allowed to be vulnerable.
Let's talk about self-care, because if we're talking about selfish, right, taking care of ourselves, then we cannot avoid the whole conversation of self-care. And in my opinion, for women in general, the way we're talking about self-care in today's environment is somewhat toxic. What do you think of self-care in the context of motherhood and being selfish? Give me your thoughts on that.
I have so many thoughts, and I totally agree with you on the self-care. The way we talk about it is so toxic. I recently responded to someone's Instagram posts. I think she's at the mom therapist or something like that. And I said most of our self-care is self-soothing.
Yes.
So we get back on the wheel and then we just do it again and then we go soothe and then we come back. What happens is we keep going up and down. We're pinging and ponging our nervous system. We never really know what is the baseline. And so when we think about motherhood, I think we have to go back to what you said earlier, where it's like we just think all of the things that we do are about the children. It's almost like we abandon ourselves. And when I talk about selfish, I say selfish is that bridge from going from self-abandonment, self-neglect, self-hate, self-judgment to self-love, right? If we look at that on a continuum, selfish gets to be that middle ground. And self-care is part of that. For many of us, we've come to see self-care as an activity. I do self-care.
Bubble baths and pedicure.
Which are amazing. I love them. I actually had a bubble bath last night. But beyond that, what is the foundation? It's not just an act that you do. It's a relationship that you have yourself. Self-care, it's just like intertwined with who you are. I'm worthy of rest. Am I listening to the thoughts that I'm thinking about myself? How am I feeling about myself? How am I acting in relationship with myself? That is self-care. Because that, once that's grounded, then you realize sometimes you don't even need the pedicure and the manicure and all of those things. I once had a client who I asked her, what does self-care look like now that we've worked together? And she said she had to fix the squeaky door in her kitchen. That to her was self-care. Why? Because she had learned to be present in her home. Before, because she was struggling with food, she'd just go in the kitchen and she'd be already like heightened, nervous, not paying attention. And she would always feel irritated. But the more she grounded herself, coming back to this is who I am. Oh, I love this. And I'm so grateful. And just present in my home, she started to realize this door has been squeaky for weeks and it's bothering me. And she fixed it. And that was it. And so we really have to come out of this thing that we do as women where we're like, what is the solution? What's the key? Just tell me and I'll do it. And it's going to fix everything. No, first of all, you don't need fixing. And so when you're thinking about self-care, start with what are the thoughts I have? What are the feelings? How am I relating with myself? Be grounded on that. And then everything else you do in relationship to that is because you desire, not because it's going to help you feel better, which is a byproduct of that experience. But that's not the goal. The goal is not so you feel better and then you can go back on the treadmill and run. Boundaries is also part of self-care. Saying no, prioritizing sleep, focusing on your season and saying, hey, this is a great opportunity, but I'm going to move for 3 months. We can check back in. Those are all parts of self-care. We really want to start thinking about it holistically. Having your time off from work and saying, I'm not going to work late is part of self-care. When we come out and look at it from that lens, we realize it's not so much check off the box. I did self-care today and that's it.
So I can do more harmful things. I can like fill the bucket with more harmful things again. So I can empty it with the pedicure in a bubble bath and I'm going to fill it again and I'm going to empty it. What I hear from you is, first of all, it's well-being, right? It's not just health, it's mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And it's solving at the root. So you don't have to go for a bubble bath and pedicure.
Yes. Bubble baths and pedicures just become a thing you want to do because you just want to do it.
It's not a coping mechanism.
Exactly. It's not necessary because you're okay.
Cool. Before we end, I want to hear you talk about another line that I heard you say that I think is going to be really inspirational for women. My baseline is high maintenance.
I wonder how many people just went,
I know. We start with work-life scam as a balance, and we end with my baseline is high maintenance.
high maintenance, baby. So this was it's something that I've adopted throughout my life. I think ever since I started personal development, I realized that many of us women, we don't choose our standards intentionally. And what do I mean by standards? What are the things that it's almost like if you were to build a house, what is the foundation of who you are as a person? Many of us don't know that. We wait for society to tell us. And so one thing I always focus on is what are my standards? And because I have such high standards for when it comes to relationships, with my communication, with the way I engage with people, this is not about being snotty for people who are thinking that way. It's not about that, but it's like, what is the thing that just makes me feel well taken care of? And how can I live up to that? So for me, that's my baseline. And so baseline, I used to work in clinical research, and baseline is pretty much like, where are we starting off from, right? Like, what is the bare minimum that we're beginning from? So that's the way I see it. For me, I have a high maintenance standard. That's my baseline. When I'm eating, I want my food experience to be amazing. You won't see me being the mom eating off of my child's plate or eating my kids' leftovers. That is not my standard. There are people who that's okay for them. But for me, it's a standard that I have. If my children are done eating, they put their food away, I'm not going to eat their scraps because I have high maintenance standard, right? When it comes to communication, there's a way that I speak to people. I'm respectful. I'm honoring to other people. I'm open to learning. I accept when I've made a mistake. Those are my standards. And so for me, I see it as if that's my high maintenance baseline, it then invites other people to step up to the plate. It's all about raising each other up, right? And so when women look at each other and they say, oh, she triggered me, because that's another popular word right now. I'm using trigger here in quote. Oh, she's triggering. And oftentimes, because that person triggered you, I use activated for it. Because that person activated you, right away, you want to cancel them. But when you really look at it, there's something about her that you desire. Yeah. And you feel that you cannot have it. And so it's time for you to start looking inward, right? So I would say 70% of my clients always tell me after that I triggered them and they were scared to come work with me. And which is fine, right? Because there's something you see in me that makes you want to go up higher, but you think you can't. And so it's your work to start to unpack those stories that you're telling yourself. Like the people who judged me for traveling, it's because they said to themselves, oh, I can't leave my children. That would make me a bad mom. Oh, is it true that you're really going to be a bad mom if you just leave your kids for a few days? We've traveled with my husband and left my kids with someone to watch them. It's not being reckless. I love my kids, but I also recognize that my relationship is important and they need to see that I have a relationship with their father. I have a relationship with myself. I have a relationship with them. And so these are my standards. So when I say high maintenance is my baseline, it's just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. If we're going to engage together, I will pull you up. And I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to be mean to you. But there are going to be things that you'll see in me that might activate you. I welcome those conversations because when I rise and you rise, we have the power to keep pulling everybody else up with the way that we address each other, with the way that we put on our clothes and show up in the world, with the way that we eat, with the way that we host relationships, with the way that we work in the world. And I see that as a thing that's going to help us to rise as women. Imagine if we all had high standards and we were not willing to settle. What would that look like? How would we show up in interviews when we're going for jobs? How would we show up in conversations when a man is trying to mansplain something to you? Would you throw a tantrum or you would hold your peace and let him speak and then you just open your mouth and let your wisdom flow, and then you walk away. How would we show up in the world? So we really, again, all of the work that I do, I always come back to how does it impact the greater collective as women? The little piece of my pie is the womanhood and motherhood space. But I think this is also about our greater collective as women and the impact that we have in the world, because people are out there trying to pull us down, and we can yell and scream and do all we want, or we can be solid in who we are and raise each other. And that doesn't mean that there's no room for yelling and screaming, but we also know that in the world, the currency is money and power. Sometimes the loudest people are not the most powerful. They don't have the money and resources behind them. And so we really want to be grounded in making sure that we have people who have those resources and power and can also do the other work. Together, that's how we raise the expectations and we raise the world where women can also stand and we change generations.
What I learned from this line, my baseline is high maintenance. I learned two things. You're not high standard to what the worlds want you to be high standard on. You are high standard on what you chose. You narrowed yourself into a niche. This is what I'm doing. And in these areas, I'm going to have high standards so I can deploy, I can play at my maximum in those areas. You're not trying to be high standard in everything that the world wants you to be in.
No, that's how we end up with stress and overwhelm and burnouts. I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, because this whole adage of having it all, it's not having it all that you want. It's having it all that people want you to have. That's when you get into trouble.
Yeah, that's so true that you brought that up, because that's exactly what it is. When we're like, oh, you can't have it all, people start thinking like, oh, they're telling me I can't do this. And then we try to push ourselves to prove that we can have it all. I'm sure you've seen this in the entrepreneurship space where quite a few women are now pulling back, like, oh, they're quitting I built this and I'm tired. Now I'm burned out. And I'm like, when you were climbing, if we're very frank, there's a part of us that wants to prove. And when we're on that proving train, a time comes where your body is like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. And you have to kind of reassess. And so what if every one of us was just consciously creating, what does all mean to you? What are the standards that are going to help you create that all? And can you focus on your lane? Because we all have different paths. It's almost like a highway when you have like a 6-lane highway and all the cars are going in one direction. Some people might be driving at slower speeds, some faster, but we're all in the same lane. The trouble happens when that one weird person decides they're just going to cut in, cut out, cut in, cut out, and then there's confusion. I see our journey as women that way. If we're all going in the same direction, some of us are SUVs, some of us are smaller Fiat cars, but we're all minding our business. We're all doing it the way that we desire. It makes for smooth traffic versus, oh, I'm going to go, now I see a Jeep, I want to be a Jeep, or I see a small Fiat, I want to be a Fiat. And then you're just in confusion.
And I don't like to use the male-female adage or feminine and masculine, but wanting it all, I think it's very patriarchal. I don't think we have that wisdom within us to want it all. We want to craft what makes us feel good. Like the way you're crafting the business, the way I'm crafting the business, I'm not trying to be it all. I'm like, I'm going to stay in my lane because I want to be happy and I want to do all these other things in my life.
Yeah, because life is not just about proving to people. There's nothing to prove. It's about what are we here to create as a collective to make it so much better so that when we leave, the people who are here, they get to experience that and they get to continue that torch versus how do I take all of it? I mean, we see this happening in what's happening in the world, but it's because we're trying to have it all. And we don't recognize the all is not for taking everything from everybody. It's like figuring out what is yours and then what is your contribution to the greater collective.
And I think that's the biggest difference between matriarchy and patriarchy. Matriarchal is collective.
Yes.
How can we move as a collective instead of dominating in the other lane of patriarchy?
Mm-hmm.
That was an awesome, inspiring conversation for mothers. How can people get more of you?
Absolutely. I am on all the places, but right now where I really love hanging out is in my email list. Permission granted. If you didn't catch the theme through this episode, it's all about permission. And I also recently changed my podcast to permission granted as well. And so you can come join me on the podcast, sign up for my email list. I do have amazing things that I do. Sometimes we hang out, sometimes we have random coaching sessions just for the fun of it. But if you're someone who is desiring to create a life and you're thinking, well, I can't really do this, I'm struggling with people-pleasing, perfectionism, all of that, come sign up. It's at oliveandbliss.ca/join. And yeah, let me know you heard the podcast episode. I'd love to say hi.
Thank you for your time, Unyime. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Hey, my sisters, if you are loving what you are learning on the podcast, you have to come and check out our feminist mentorship masterclasses and our internationally recognized non-diet coaching certification on our website at www.stephaniedote.com/shop. This is where you can get the individual coaching and the support to take the concept taught on the podcast to the next level, embrace our well-being in a way that will expand our collective freedom and power. Come and join myself and other women to learn how to reshape your mind, not your body. I'll see you there.